Hello, my name is Roger Owen, and thank you for watching this video. It has come to my attention that President Barack Obama plans on visiting Asia in April, and one of his stops is going to be the Philippines. I happen to be an American expat, and I live here just north of the Metro Manila area. I did send the White House an email, and I don't think anybody's surprised. I never got a reply sharing my objections to President Obama visiting the Philippines. And I made a list of reasons why, and what I would like to do to start with is maybe just read that email to you and try to explain as I go through. Another area which I want to touch later on is the American Embassy and all the money that's been spent there, and how basically it's just there to cater to the Filipino, not the American, which of course I have issue with too, because to say the least, that's American dollars. So let me start with this email first, and we'll just take it from there, and just please be with me because I'm not really that comfortable when it comes to making these videos. I started with to the Honorable President Obama, the subject visiting the Philippines. Dear Mr. President, in 2006 I was a Democratic nominee who challenged Louie Gohmert in East Texas, that's District 1. With no party support, I did not even spend one penny of my own money, and to this day no one from the Democratic Party was able to acquire a higher percentage of votes than I did against Louie Gohmert. In 2008 I ran as an independent. And one thing I find interesting is the President's positions on his last State of the Union address on education and energy and immigration, are kind of similar to my TV commercials that I ran with my own money in 2008. After that loss, I moved to the Philippines. If you wish, I will send you copies of those 7 TV commercials and the issues. In reference to visiting the Philippines, to quote George W. Bush, it is wrong to reward bad behavior. I truly believe those words. I did not vote for him, but I do agree with those words. Filipinos treat American expats extremely bad. The average Filipino in the Metro Manila Central Luzon area hates even the mention of our name. When my Filipino wife ran for mayor of Baras, Rizal, and I'll put the website there for you, she was called American in a derogatory term, Black, Obama, the N-ger word, to my face from people in the crowd. To say the very least, any Filipina that marries an American, she is looked at with disgust because Filipinos are users. You've got at least 5 million of them in America. They're allowed to own property. They go for citizenship. They vote. In the Philippines, we can't own property. Filipinos, they come back here, they get dual citizenship. Okay, now I think that's against the law there in America. But as expats, we even if we wanted citizenship, it's not given to us. Let's go back over a little bit of history. When America granted the Philippines its independence, they were limited to only 50 Filipinos per year that could go for citizenship in America. Believe it or not, the Filipinos, copy, they did the same thing. To this day, it's still only 50 any kind of expat from anywhere in the world that can go for Filipino citizenship. They're tribal by nature. They want to keep the Filipino at home, but they don't want any foreign input, none whatsoever. So why in heaven's name are we sending them even one tax dollar, much less any kind of courtesy, because they disrespect us. Now, I will make a point here. Just like New York is different from Texas, which is different from, California, the same holds true in the Philippines. The people in the Metro Manila area, very racist, very hatred. They really do not like Americans. Bottom line, Okay? That is a no-brainer. But you get down into the Visayas like Cebu or maybe Davao, they're much more friendly towards us. We're more welcome down there. Now, if President Obama was to go to Davao or go to Cebu, and here's another key issue, talk to some of the expats, especially the Americans. But whether it's Americans, Germans, people from Australia, it makes no difference. Talk to the expats, be part of them. Don't rely on, the U.S. Embassy there in Manila that's basically manned by Filipinos. And when I was trying to get my U.S. passport renewed, I sat there at window number 4. Basically all Filipinos on the second floor there. I seen at least 5 couples with their 8-year-old kids going there, getting American, citizenship and passports for them. It's just a revolving door. That's one of the reasons why I left the U.S. is, number one, because I happen to be a fiscal conservative. I'm more of a libertarian than anything. The national debt, the trade deficit, immigration, huge problem. They let these foreigners just come in and just walk all over us and get dual citizenship and everything else. And, when it comes to Americans, when we go to these other countries, we have absolutely no support whatsoever, from Washington. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. I would rather live amongst my enemies than to live under a government like the U.S. who pretends to be my friend. Bottom line, Congress right now, they can't even agree on anything. It's nothing but a game to them. They don't get anything done there. It's all political nonsense. And I do not miss the U.S. But at the same time, I do get upset when I see American taxpayer dollars being thrown into a country that literally do nothing but scam us. Remember, we had the U.S. bases here. What happened? We built some big, beautiful cities, not even where a chimpanzee would go, way up in the mountains, Baguio being one. We got nothing in return for it. We gave it to these people. Why? What's the issue here? At least, in South Korea, they helped pay for our military presence there. But these Filipinos, they got their hand out like a beggar, wanting the American government, to, put money in their hand. This was maybe a year ago. Washington, I don't know why, they came out with, I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars, giving it to Filipinos that fought for their country in World War II. Am I missing something here? Why are we paying soldiers in other countries money that they had to fight for to protect their own country? Do you know how much money the Philippine government put in? Nothing. Not a single penny. Is that fair? Not from my position, it's not. Not when it is American taxpayer dollars. And so, I got a little bit sidetracked, but, forgive me, this video, it's not going to be all coherent. I'm just going to spiel on whenever, something comes to mind. And to continue here, sir, I did vote for you in 2008 before moving to the Philippines. The reason why I did was because I did like John McCain, but the reality is, he was representing the Republicans. As old Clyde Berry, a friend of mine there in East Texas said, the Republicans are crooks. The Democrats are just plain stupid. And so, considering, what Clyde Berry said, I really didn't have too much of an option. I did not want to see the Republicans get back in office because they done nothing but run up the national debt too. And so that's the reason why I gave Obama my vote. And like I said, I moved to the Philippines, January 2009. And with all my heart, I believe you should not visit the Philippines before they extend equal treatment and opportunities to all legal expats as Filipinos enjoy in the U.S. and many other countries. You've got between maybe 12 to 15 million Filipinos, legal and illegal, working and living in other countries. They drain those countries of their money and they send it back to the Philippines as remittance. Where's the fairness? They're allowed to go there. You got 5 million in the U.S. alone. And as I said, they can, buy homes, they can go for citizenship, they can vote, they can come back to the Philippines, they can get a dual citizenship. What can we get? We can't get nothing. We can't get nothing in this country. Why in heaven's name would we want to spend one single penny of American taxpayer money or tarnish the image of Washington with any kind of a relationship with people in a government that absolutely bastardizes not only the Americans but basically all expats in this area. And so to get on to this letter, sir, there is no place for racism and hatred in any country that enjoys American taxpayer dollars in a relationship with Washington, D.C. And then I put respectfully my name, Roger L. Owen, and my contact information. And so right now, what I would like to do is I'm going to go with that when, as I may have stated before, when I went to the U.S. Embassy, to get my passport renewed, basically it was all Filipino up there. Even behind the glass was Filipino. And as I may have said, I sat there and at window number 4 waiting my turn, and I watched at least 5 couples with their 8-year-old kids go up to window number 5 and get their American citizenship and their American passport. Just a revolving door. Now, what does America do to stop this? And another big issue, in the last 4 years, they have rebuilt that American embassy to where it's at least, it looks from the outside at least 4 to 5 times larger than what it was just 3 years ago. Unbelievable. If the American embassy isn't there for the Americans, and I'm talking about the true Americans that was born in America, then why in the world are we spending so much resources in American taxpayer dollars while we borrow from China, just to what? Help these Filipinos? Scam us? President Obama, if you even get just a small snippet of this here, you need to rethink your Asian policy, especially when it comes to visiting the Philippines. There's just no way you want to come to Manila and give these people any kind of credit when they are scamming the American expat virtually every day of the week. It's just ungodly. So if I can, I'm going to now read this letter that I sent to the U.S. Embassy. Now, at that particular time, you had Ambassador Thomas, who happened to be, African American, that was the ambassador there. And I make reference to it later on. The subject, my disappointment in Manila, in the Manila U.S. Embassy. Dear Manila U.S. Embassy, I go out of my way not to view the U.S. Embassy in Manila, but I had to make a trip there yesterday to pay the $110 to renew my U.S. passport. There are so many disappointments that I do not wish to waste time making reference to all of them in this email, so I will focus on the main issues. 4 years ago, I sent my Filipino wife there to get a visitor's visa so she could help me load the last 2 40-foot containers of my personal effects from the U.S. and ship it to the Philippines. She was denied. Reason being, they think that any Filipino that goes to America is going to become a permanent resident, and they wanted me to petition her. There is no way in this lifetime I am going to return to a country to where I do not agree with the policies of that country. It's simply not going to happen. And if you hear a small kitten in the background, a cat, I've done a video on how on animal cruelty and how they abuse kittens. Right now, our lovely little kitten, I named her Sugar. She is now 6 months old and she's going through heat. And so if you hear her in the background crying, you know, that's what's taking place. Okay, she was denied. I was forced to fly to LA by myself, drive all the way to Florida by myself, because that was the cheapest way for me to travel there, load the two 40-foot containers by myself, drive back to LA by myself, just because the interviewer, my Filipino wife, appeared before at the U.S. Embassy in Manila, thought that I would let her stay in the U.S. Then I say, stupid, stupid, really stupid. It's not going to happen. Okay? And to make matters worse, yesterday, I would turn 62, it would be March of next year. And when I visited, you know, window 17, the Filipino at that window made it clear to me that my Filipino wife had to spend 5 years in the U.S. to qualify to collect any benefits, which means that I would need to live there. That would never happen. Short of deportation or arrest, I will never live in the U.S. again. He also made it clear to me that my Filipino wife would only get $250 towards my burial, which my blood pressure any given day of the week right now, you know, I'm not in that good of health. It's running between around 180 over 115. Sometimes if I relax, I can get it down to about 150, 160. I don't know how much time I have left, but to say the least, it's not too optimistic. Okay. Getting back to this here, as I said, you know, they were only going to offer her, once I pass away, $250 towards the burial. The average burial in the Philippines can go anywhere between, you know, $500, you know, to maybe $1,000 and up. The average one being around $1,000. $250, you know, isn't even remotely close to, you know, taking care of, you know, my body, you know, once I pass away. The only reason for us to visit the U.S. is to buy swimming pool products and to conduct business. I happen to be a pool contractor, and the only reason, as I just said, we would ever go to the U.S. is either to go to a swimming pool convention or to buy, you know, products, which obviously helps the American economy because I bring it back to the Philippines and, you know, make business here. Just one more thought. While I was waiting at window 4, I made reference to this. I watched, you know, 5 other couples with their young kids go there to window 5 for American citizenship. A never-ending, nasty circle giving these Filipinos the opportunity to own property in the U.S. and have dual citizenship while the American is cheated. And just 3 blocks from the Manila U.S. Embassy, some Filipino guy yelled at me, "Hey, American boy." I yelled back, "Hey, Filipino boy." When was the last time U.S. Ambassador Harry K. Thomas Jr. called a boy? Unspeakable. Just unspeakable. These Filipinos are nasty, especially Manila. And President Obama, he's going to come here where they use the N-word, where they use black, where they call people boy that's from America. President Obama, what's the matter with you? Is your intel corrupt? If you want good intel, you need to get away from those glass walls that the U.S. Embassy, you know, the people there hide behind. And you need to talk to us expats. We're your boots on the ground. We know what's taking place here on the streets. And we're the ones you should be talking to. When President Aquino from the Philippines goes to another country, even America, he doesn't talk to you first. He talks to other Filipino expats that are there in America. Most of them have citizenship. What are you going to do? Spend your time looking at a bunch of people that's going to smile at you and give you lies so that you can, you know, throw the American taxpayers' money away? Have you forgot about Subic? Have you forgot about Clark? We live just outside Clark, not even 10 minutes, and the Filipinos just simply ran it into the ground. And I'll finish up this story, this email that I'm reading to you. These Filipinos in Central Luzon are nasty. I have been cheated, scammed, abused, etc., not only by the people in Central Luzon, but also by the officials in government. And the U.S. government is allowing U.S. military personnel to come back? Are you stupid? Have you forgotten what happened to the American bases here? What has this government done for the American expat and all the foreigners in general? And as I've already said, I ran for U.S. Congress, Texas, 2006, the Democratic Nominee, 2008 is the Independent. And, it's after that there, I moved to the Philippines, and, I'm making the best of it. But to say the very least, we're not getting any help from the American government whatsoever. Now, to get to this little list, as I said, if President Obama, if he wants to visit the Philippines, definitely not Manila. He should go at least to the Visayas, to Cebu or Davao, to where, especially not only American expats, but all expats in general, are treated more warmly. We're welcome down there. We're allowed to be part of the community. And here's another thing. Talking about Filipinos, they're tribal in nature. You look at an expat, and you look at photos. They say a picture tells 1,000 words. With an American expat, you'll see all kinds of Filipinos surrounding him, in that photo. Because expats here, we do try to assimilate, into society. We try to be part of the community here. It's the Filipino that keeps us out. It's the Filipino that bastardizes us, and it's the Filipino that stops us from doing any type of business or doing anything here, while they're given opportunities in America and other countries. Now you take the same scenario. You look at a Filipino in America, that same photo, he'll be surrounded by nothing but Filipino. Segregation. They do not assimilate into the general public. Just like a tribe, they stay to their own kind, and they keep, even in America, for all intents and purposes, they stay away from the American system, and they stay away from the American. Is that really what we want when it comes to, immigration for America? Let's talk about IQ levels. The average IQ in the world is 100. China comes in basically average at 100. Believe it or not, and I blame this on the immigrants that's been pouring by the millions into America over the years. The average IQ of America has now dipped under 100. It's at 98. You look at the Philippines, the average IQ, go on the internet, check it out, is an 86. Do not believe it. Filipinos cheat at everything. That IQ of 86, guaranteed it was taken in the more upscale areas like Makati, like Cebu, Global City. You get outside the main cities into the countryside, you're looking at the low 70s, 70 to maybe, at best a 75. Mental retardation starts at 70. You're lucky if a cop that's carrying a gun and wearing a badge has an IQ of 86. Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath there. And so when it comes to people with these lower IQs, how can they be an asset to America? We're one of the most advanced countries in the world. And when it comes to our labor force, it's really geared towards, technology, innovation. Now, what in the world can you get out of an individual if his IQ is just a little bit above mental retardation? Now, I know this is going to be a hot issue, but the bottom line is, if an individual doesn't have anything to offer the American economy, why in heaven's name is Washington going to let those people in? You know, we've got enough idiots in Congress that can't get along. The last thing we need is to add to it as far as voters. And so, you know, that's my 2 cents when it comes to IQ. Now, you know, as I said here, I'm going to read this list a little bit for you. You know, I made reference to, you know, President Obama, if he does come here, he should really spend more time with the expats than what he does with Aquino. You know, because we really are the boots on the ground. Racism and hatred, I think I've gone over that pretty good. Filipino dual citizenship, I've touched base on that. You know, why in heaven's name are these Filipinos allowed to have dual citizenship? They're just cheating and scamming the American taxpayer. And they bring the Social Security, you know, money from retirement, they bring it back. You know, they send remittance. You know, they drain the American economy by sending money back to the Philippines. You know, I can't say this enough. George W. Bush was 100% correct. You don't reward bad behavior. You've got people here, they messed up this country. And I've said this before. The success or failure of a country is the direct results of the people of that country. The Filipinos, they made this mess. As I've said in another video, these people were nothing but a bunch of savages, different tribes on 7,107 islands. You know, the Spaniards came here. They grew a great big line in the ocean and says, I here now declare the, you know, Philippines. And he looked at one of these tribal people and said, and I declare you a Filipino. And the Filipino, oh, I'm a Filipino. I never knew that before. And before you know it, you know, these people were literally, over time, the Americans came in, you know, they set up schools, they built infrastructure, you know, they, you know, built a government. They gave it to these people only to pollute the democratic system, going out there buying votes, you know, for a cup of rice. These people, you know, they haven't got the intelligence to live under a democracy. And why is the American government wasting American taxpayer money on trying to set up these governments that turn into a total embarrassment for Americans? You know, these people simply haven't had it. You know, they copied everything, including the American Constitution, which they just renamed the Philippine Constitution. It comes to a jury system. They have no jury system here in the Philippines. Why? Because if a Filipino doesn't get paid something for it, he's not going to sit on a jury. No way. You know, it's, you know, there's the poor cat in the background, Sugar, you know, she's crying, you know, please forgive her. And so, you know, it's, I just hate to say it, the American government has made a lot of mistakes when it comes to involvement in other countries, and the Philippines was a major one. Andrew Carnegie was literally, in the history of mankind, he came in the top 4 as being the richest man in the world. At that time, he was the richest man in the world. He was willing to pay the American government $20 million to get the Americans out of the Philippines. And of course, his offer was not accepted by the president at that time. And so, you know, it's not like this has just happened yesterday. You know, there's some countries to where, you know, we welcome relationships with, and then there's other countries to where we really should use a little bit of tough love and say, look, you know, you need to get your own house in order. You need to start treating the expats better. I mean, even some of these Filipinos, they work as OFWs in these other countries. This is shameful. They need help to get home. And some of these, you know, Filipinos that are there to basically protect their own people in these other countries over in the Middle East, you know, they bribe them for sex. They want to have sex with these poor women in order to get them back home. Show me another country that is that nasty towards their own women. And that's why you really can't blame a lot of these Filipinos for wanting a relationship with a foreigner, because a lot of the Filipino guys, they just don't treat them with very much respect. This was many years ago. I started coming to the Philippines over 23 years ago. I was visiting a Rotary Club, down there in the Cebu area, one of the main Rotary clubs, and this one Filipino, he stands up trying to be funny, and he says, "Do you know what a boat and a woman have in common? They both have wet bottoms." I'm not joking. That's the kind of foolishness they have in the Philippines when it comes to the way they treat their women. Well, to say the very least, there was, some people there that brought it to the attention of, the Rotary International, and, they were told that it was not appropriate. Back about 3 years ago, I visited a Rotary Club in the Metro Manila area, and this is just unbelievable. They ran this video of this Caucasian kid out of California, early 20s probably, surfer-looking type of guy, and was offering him money to carry this short, heavy-set, Mexican, or at least Mexican descent, around town on his shoulders and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And at the end, I'm being just so honest that this is just so nasty. They paid this American kid like it was $900 if he would eat a hot dog out of the crack of the butt of this Mexican guy. And this surfer kid, he did it. And all the Filipinos here at the Rotary was there laughing at it, while I'm sitting there, in this meeting. And at the end of the video, they offered him another $100 to make it, $1,000 if he would pull one of the pubic hairs out of the pants of this, Mexican, and use it to floss his teeth, which he did. Now, I will even tell you which club it was. This was the Rotary Club of Marikina. Okay? This isn't some small Rotary Club. Now, it's I'm not joking. The racism and the hatred towards the American is off the charts here. And for Obama to show any kind of favor, to the Filipinos by making a visit here without first demanding that they raise their standards, not only towards Americans but towards all expats in general, you're doing nothing but putting a dark spot. You're tarnishing the image of Washington, and you're definitely wasting American taxpayer dollars. Now, I know I'm going on. I'm going to try to get through this list, and I want to say thank you for those that have watched this much of it. If you're not nauseated by now, you should be. There's something wrong with you, because I get nauseated just thinking about the way Americans are treated here and how they look at us as fools. I made a modest 4.0 in psychology. Okay, and this is after I was out of school for like 12, 13 years. I went back and I aced it. And that was one of the best courses I ever took. I love psychology. And, at times what they do is they use, animals and the way they react to things, and they compare it to humans. And so I'm not being racist here, but I'm going to give you a very good example. Take a monkey that's in a cage and offer the monkey a banana. The monkey will get it, then most of the time will run to the other side of the cage and eat it in front of you. In other words, the monkey was smart enough, to get the banana away from you. They don't understand that it's generosity. They go to the other side of the cage, they eat it thinking, well, I'm smarter than this human person, and I got the banana away from them. Bingo. Filipino mentality. When you give anything to a Filipino, most Filipinos, the appreciation isn't there. They have the mentality, oh, you come from a rich country, you can afford. Now, this one Filipino friend of mine, he's been working over in Saudi Arabia, actually his father, for 31 years. And he came home a couple months ago for vacation, and I talked to him for a couple hours. And we were talking about, the typhoon that just went through the Philippines. And he said, the Filipino is like this, then the Filipino is like this. Now, I'm not too sure what he meant, but if I was to try to translate that, I would probably think he was saying the Filipino is quick to take, but there's nothing in his hand if you need help in return. If you want to learn about a Filipino, talk to other Filipinos. Most of my knowledge has come from other Filipinos. And so, let me get on to the list here, because I know you're getting tired of watching this video. I told you about, my feelings when it comes to Washington not representing the American people. There is no future for America unless we get our financial house in order. And I don't wish bad things on America. I would love to see America stay strong. But with the national debt going up every single year, the trade deficit going up, everything from health care to you name it, how in heaven's name can America survive? When it comes to, Obama made reference in his State of the Union address when it came to education, and I made reference to it. I want to put these videos on. One thing I said during the campaign in 2008, if you want to really compete with these other countries in the area of technology, innovation, at the very least what you have to do is you need to match these other countries. These other countries, they send their citizens, like Brunei and some of the Middle East, to America free education. I think it's over half the people right now in universities, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're from other countries. And these other countries are sending their people to American universities, for literally a free education. And what do we do with our people? We load them up with financial debt for years and years, some of them never able to repay it. And so, like I said, like when it comes to science, technology, innovation, those areas, we got to match these other countries if we plan on competing in tomorrow's economy. That's just all there is to it. Now, when it comes to attorneys and other practices like that, as far as I'm concerned, they should pay full plus maybe another 10% on top of their tuition, because I really don't have that much respect for attorneys. If anything, I look at attorneys as being a liability. Yes, Mr. President Obama, you and your wife are attorneys. Yes, down in Florida, I was against the legal profession. One of my issues going back to the 1982 was to literally dissolve the Florida bar and to replace it with an elected commission. That way, when you brought an attorney up on charges, they would not be going before their own kind. They would be going before an elected commission that would be accountable to the people, to the voter. To say the very least, the Florida bar was not too crazy about my position. And ironically, they seen to it that I would never run for public office again there in Florida or be able to vote. They found an excuse, put me in prison. Yes, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't use drugs, I don't gamble. I did 7 months in a Florida prison, which took away my right to vote for the rest of my life. They literally took away my American citizenship there in the state of Florida. That's why I had to move to Texas, because Texas does honor the American citizen, and they do honor the right to vote. In Florida, I hate to say it, it's not a right. You step on their toes, the vote is a privilege, and they will take it away. I've had basically everything on this list, and I do want to say thank you for taking the time. There's a lot of other issues which I'm not making reference to right now, but I've said enough. And please talk to the people there in Congress. Talk to the senators. Try to send an email to President Obama. Tell him coming to the Philippines is not a good idea until the Philippines basically they clean up their act. If I can make reference to just maybe one or two other things, we sold the Philippines some warships, and there was some fishing boats from Taiwan out in the ocean, and the Filipinos felt that these fishing boats was in their waters, which are disputed to begin with. They shot and they killed a 65-year-old Taiwanese fisherman, and they went a long time and was not going to apologize. No joke. Filipinos are nasty. Now, where was the captain on this American-made warship? The Filipino captain. What was he doing? Why was these Filipinos allowed to laugh and take pot shots at these Taiwanese? Back several years ago, you had, I think it was like 8 tourists from Hong Kong, 7 or 8 tourists from Hong Kong. They come down here. They had a police officer. Okay, now we're talking about a Filipino police officer that became distraught, and he went under the bus, and when they tried to take over the bus and get this officer out, these Hong Kong tourists, they were murdered. President Aquino, this Filipino president, would not apologize to Hong Kong or take responsibility for these tourists getting killed at the hands of his police. Think about that. There's no credibility in the word of a Filipino, especially in this Philippine government. And so, why in heaven's name do we want to send anybody of any caliber, especially the President of the United States, to a country that does nothing but ignore its obligations to even its neighbors? None of the neighbors, the other countries in the around the Philippines here, have any respect for the Filipino. There's just no respect there. You have a lot of Filipinas working as housemaids in Hong Kong. After they're there for several years, they done a march there in Hong Kong trying to get permanent resident status. They were nothing but workers. But that's the way a Filipino is. They will go into a country and they will bend over backwards to try to get a foothold in that country. And it's President Obama, if you're watching any portion of this, you need to carefully weigh the consequences of you showing any kind of credibility to the Philippines here. It is a major mistake. You're in a unique position. You can put restrictions on the Philippines here. You can encourage this Philippine government to start showing equal treatment and opportunities towards the expats, including American expats here. You have that ability. When Washington sneezes, the Philippine government, they literally get pneumonia. They end up in the ICU. And so, Mr. President, if you want to do anything constructive, don't come to the Philippines. What you can do is lay out even a modest agenda as far as fairness, as far as creating opportunities for your people that are American citizens that happen to reside in the Philippines. That's all I've got to say, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Have a good day. Bye now.